If there's a win, then go get it.
What I call winning. If your goal is to be a better mother, if your goal is to get promoted.
If there's a life, you've got to live it.
So don't hide your superpower. Don't drop your mic. Don't lower your voice. Don't hide who you are.
If there's prosperity, I want you to have it.
Then what we aspire to become is really inevitable and not impossible.
And if there is wisdom, I pray you receive it.
And so I think the companies did not do a SWOT analysis of what could go wrong or what must be true in order for them to hire 50 or
IoT or all of the technologies that happen that we try to tighten up and shore up. But there's other factors that happen in the anatomy of a breach, and that is the human factor. We have that same mindset about it's just a matter of time, it's not impossible, it's inevitable, then that will guide our walk. And we will walk boldly.
Always find a way to win.
When you have this growth mindset, you say, you know what? I've won before. I can win again. I have so much to offer. I have so much to gain. I am not done.
1, 2, 3. Okay, you heard from them. We gotta go. We gotta win. God bless you guys. I always laugh when I see that. Hello, everybody. Hello, family. Hello, friends. Hello, colleagues. My name is Daphne Jones, former Chief Information Officer, current Public Board of Directors, published author, and a CEO of a board readiness company named the Board Curators. And now I'm the host of episode 2 of the Winner's Circle Live. And it's all about how do you win as you define winning. These live broadcasts are where I hope to bring you amazing, special, a lot of times humble, spirit-filled people who serve others, who lead others, and who always themselves find a way to win. As the author of the book, Win When They Say You Won't, in that book, I share people's stories, their failures, their triumphs, because I believe that by ourselves, we know a little, but when we tap into the resources and experiences and wisdom of other people, we know everything, right? So these series of monthly LinkedIn Lives will help us to learn more than we currently know. And I pray that it will inspire us to do more than we already have. Let me just give you a couple of ground rules today. We're going to be introducing our guest in a moment. And whenever you have any questions, you can just go into the chat and ask a question, and you can do hashtag Ask John if you would like to make a comment or ask a question. Also, the Winner's Circle Perspective is my video series. So there's Winner's Circle Live, which we're on right now, but we also have the Winner's Circle Perspectives. It's my video series where I share perspectives with you about technology, about learning, about growth, personal development, and more. So I encourage you guys to subscribe. So it is time to introduce to some and to present to others a person who really isn't just merely a guest, but a friend. It goes back to my former days when I was at General Electric, or otherwise known as GE. Let me tell you about him. He is the managing director and head of portfolio resources at Charlesbank. In this role, he works to drive equity and value creation across the portfolio of companies in this private equity company by collaborating with the CEOs and their teams to enhance operating performance, strategy, and governance. John joined Charlesbank in 2019 after a 31, yes, you heard me say it, 31-year career at GE. He's probably wondering, where did that time go? I know where my hair went, but where did the time go? A 31-year career at GE, where he most recently served as chairman of GE and chief executive officer. His career at GE began much earlier than mine did in 1987, and he held various leadership positions in the US, Latin America, and Asia, including the CEO of GE Equity. He was the CEO of GE Capital of Asia, the CEO of GE India, the head of GE's M&A and strategy process, and finally, the head of, or the CEO of the $18 billion GE unit in healthcare. And then after serving as CEO of GE Healthcare, he became CEO of GE. And I'm just so, so proud to have him here. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Finance from Fairfield University, and he's an MBA from the Wharton School at University of Penn. Let us welcome my friend, my mentor, my role model, and supporter, John Flannery.
Thanks, Daphne. It's great to be here. It's always great to see you.
It's great to see you too, John. And usually, like the last episode that I did, my first episode, I actually had somebody applauding, but I didn't do that today. So I have to remember to get the applause machine. So before we get started on the questions that come to mind that I think people may want to hear about, I read your bio obviously just now, but what does success look like in your role at Charlesbank? What do you do, and how do you say, oh my goodness, we had a great year, we had a great 2024 or 2025? What does that look like?
So we're a private equity firm. So our basic reason for being is we buy companies. We're in middle market companies, so not as big as a GE, but so these might be companies with 200 million in sales to $1 billion or something. And ultimately, we aim to improve their operations and sell them or take them public or do something with them at the end of 3, 5, 7 years, depends on the circumstances. So we're stewards of other people's money. We're raising money from other people and investing on their behalf. So our scorecard, our benchmark is growing the value of the company. So that's what it's the ultimate measurement. And so each year we look at, how have we done on that? It's very mathematical. Obviously, you can determine that. But I would say above and beyond that, I also look a lot at how the teams at the company have grown, how the CEOs of the companies have grown, how we've built out the teams. Very frequently, a lot of these companies are going through big changes and we're adding resources, et cetera. So I get a report card and a satisfaction out of the team building aspect. And then lastly, Daphne, I'd say Charlesbank's a relatively small firm. We've got about 180 professionals. I spend a ton of time working with people who are a lot younger than I am. And I love doing that and, sharing, sort of my perspectives and getting theirs and learning from them. And so I'd say our portfolio value creation is the ultimate scorecard, but growth of the teams and people at our companies and at Charlesbank would be right up there.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Great. So we're going to break our conversation into a couple categories. The first one is about leadership. And this was a little bit more tilted towards CEO leadership. There are many people who may be on the call, who may watch us later, that may aspire to be in that corner CEO office, but they may not always get a chance to talk to somebody who's there or has been there, right? So prior to your leading one of the world's most, respected companies like GE and GE Healthcare, was there a pivotal point in your career that let you know that you were on track to become the CEO?
In hindsight, I would say yes. First and foremost, Daphne, as you can imagine, I joined GE in 1987 at the absolute bottom rung. Like it was just I was right out of business school and I got a super entry level position, and I never really, certainly at that point, and really most of the time, never, ever, ever could have imagined being the CEO. So I didn't live, 20, 25 years saying like, hey, if I do this, I'm one click closer to being CEO. But in the later years, obviously became a little more plausible, I guess. But the two things I would look at, I moved to Japan and ran GE Capital in Asia. And that was sort of a far-flung from headquarters job. Everybody thought it was not a good idea for me to do that. My friends thought it was a very bad decision. We did spectacularly well. We were very small. GE was not doing well in Asia. We were trying to run the financial service business from the U.S. And so I had a boss at GE Capital then, Mike Neal, who he took an incredible chance on me in every sense. He promoted me up a few levels. He gave me a lot of authority to make investments, and just had confidence in me, or lack of sense of how much experience I lacked for that job. But we did incredibly well, and I was able to build a really different team, very diverse team. I was managing 12, 13, 14 countries. So that was I'd been working in the US largely before then. And that was the first time where I was like, wow, the scale of what we did just changed overnight and dramatically. And we went from making about $100 million a year in income to about $1 billion in 4 years. And so so that was one where I was kind of far from home and on my own. When I came out of that, my self-confidence coming out of that assignment was way higher than before. And then the other one I would say is I got a job to run GE company in India. And I had grown up in the financial service part. This was another decision that most of my friends thought was a very poor judgment on my part.
Do you still have those friends? Are they still your friends?
Yeah, exactly. Well, one of the things you and I have talked about before, but part of it was these were like offbeat career choices that people weren't beating down the door to have either one of those jobs. And in the case of the India job, it was the industrial business for the first time. And so people were like, what do you know about aircraft engines or power stations or oil and gas and the answer is I didn't know much about those things, other than a very superficial level. And that was another circumstance where we went from about 700 million in sales to about 5 billion in 4 years. And I just got the confidence that I could operate in a realm. Both of those together were one followed the other. And when I came out of those, I was like, these have been two pretty wacky assignments, that I easily could have blown up in, very easily could have. And they were very different. And I kind of, survived in both of those. And in both of those, it was a lot around the team and the different teams and building the teams and really different sort of cultures and contexts. So when I finished that, I was kind of like, there's not much that I haven't seen at this point in my life. I feel like you could throw a lot at me and I feel like I could handle it.
So it sounds like you got a nod. Somebody believed in you, had faith in you, saw something in you. It may not have been the knowledge of all the aspects of GE's business, but there was some quality in you that they said, we see something in John. Then you also went the road less traveled. When you said, I can make a difference in this location or this organization, and you clearly did. And so once you did that, plus you already had the nod, then I would just imagine it was just one thing after another that led to your continuing success at GE.
Yeah.
Had an attitude that your supporters had.
Yeah. I didn't seek out per se, like, let me find the problems, but I guess they sought me or people felt I was a good fit for that. But at the time, and I think anybody navigating career choices, political organizations, et cetera, so many people were like, I want to be in the best business or the successful business or the one that's clearly winning, or, I want to work in the division that's clearly winning. And, I keep saying to people, and I would say when I was in GE, like, if you run the race in the middle of the pack, you just stay where everybody else is, you're going to finish the race in the middle of the pack. It's like tautological. So, and frequently areas where companies have a challenge or they're underperforming or there's a problem, it's not sort of like a banishment to those things. It's actually a high profile thing. People 2 or 3 layers up are like very concerned about those things. So people thought I'd lose my visibility, and it was really the opposite. I got way more visibility in those jobs than I would have if I stayed in the mainstream.
That's right. I reminded of I think might have done an article about this, the glass cliff. The glass cliff assignment is usually given to somebody when the job is very, very valuable and important to you, say 3 levels above you, very, very important and valuable, very visible. They're watching the numbers all the time. And the third aspect of a glass cliff assignment is it's impossible to do. You took what might have been impossible, which is why your dear friend said, "Don't do it, John. Don't go, don't go." So when you think about aspiring CEOs, a friend of mine, she might be watching. She's the CEO of an AI company, co-founder. What are the top behaviors and competencies, mindsets that CEOs, people who want to be in that corner office, need to adopt that'll help them weather the storm? Because in the role of CEO, there's uncertainty, there's economic chaos, there's political doomsday, there's all kinds of geopolitical, geographic challenges. How do you stay clear and focused and still come out on top, winning as a CEO? And I don't mean that you as a CEO, but how do you and your company, because of your leadership?
So it's very easy to get pulled in 100 directions, right? Because when you're the CEO, everything is on your plate in one way or another. And so I think there's really 3 things that I always tried to focus on. One, and first and foremost, was like defining the mission and defining success and defining winning. Like, why do we exist? What do we need to accomplish? Why will that be meaningful to the world and to this team? You've got to get people to. And when we were in GE Healthcare, that was probably the easiest of all jobs to do that in, of just like, hey, we're affecting people's lives all around the world, and what we do really matters. Globally, it matters to your family, my family, et cetera. But so first is a sense of mission and defining success, because everybody, it didn't matter if I was working in Argentina or India or US or Japan or wherever, people want to win. They really, really want to win. And so you got to define for them, this is what winning is. The second thing was team, just an absolute obsession with team building, broad team, diverse team, because people, again, I found, want to be on a team, want to contribute, want to know how they're contributing to winning. And then the third thing was, and again, keeping that first part simple, like defining winning can't be 27 things. It's got to be 2 or 3. You could get somebody 12,000 people deep in the organization could say, yeah, this is what we're doing here. And then the third one really is allocation of resources. Financial resources. Frequently at GE, we're making major decisions around, should we buy this, sell this? Should we launch this product or not launch this product? Should we do this research and technology investment or not? Should we hire more people or add certain kinds of capabilities? So I think as a CEO, if you have a sharp mission, engaged team that understands and contributes to that, you're allocating your resources, you've got to do those 3 things well.
Great. That's awesome. And so I've jotted actually those down. So we'll see those again. So then as you talk about your team, we're not here by ourselves and we're not here for ourselves. And I remember you like to say that it's not about your horsepower alone that's going to get you to the finish line. It's about the horsepower of your team. So how do you as a leader get the most out of your team? How do you keep them motivated? How do you keep them focused? How do you keep them customer centric? How do you keep them winning? And when there are these things that are being thrown at them, they know that there's 3 priorities or 5 priorities, but yet still somebody else who didn't get the memo, think another 5 priorities that they should be doing.
So I can answer that in 2 parts. One is that you didn't exactly ask, but I think it leads into the second. You asked earlier about the arc of career and, how did that go? I think the single biggest inflection point in my career, and I don't even really recall how it happened, but I remember it, it happening, is the moment I really started to accept of like, hey, I'm really the sum total of the team that's around me. Because so many of us, you spend your life self-propelled for 20, 30, 40 years, right? You're studying, you get good grades, you go to a good school, you get a good job, you're an individual contributor, you get maybe managing small teams, you can kind of do that yourself or make up for weaknesses in the team, but you get to some level where all of a sudden it's like, it's too big, it's too complicated. And I found that the people, and I had this sort of epiphany at one point, it changes your whole mindset from like, it's not about me anymore. You know, I have to kind of ditch the 30-year model I've been running on. It's really about the team and getting the right people and getting them, connected and motivated. So that it was a pivotal thing to me, is accepting that. And you can't be an A student if you have C players on your team, even if you've been an A student for 30 years. So that was the first biggest thing. And then I spent a huge amount of time on the team, because once you do accept that basic algorithm of like, I'm a weighted average, my success, the organization's success is a function of the team, almost, little else matters. I'll talk about customers in a second, but so I just spent a huge amount of time like constructing the team, getting people from different backgrounds, getting people that I felt like would fit together, people who would challenge each other, and getting them motivated. The single biggest thing, I think, Daphne, was getting them motivated around what is the definition of success. The success is ultimately always external. It's always about customers and again, people wanting to win and wanting to know how they do that. So a well-constructed team, motivated by a mission and feeling like they're winning. I always tell the story when GE Healthcare won like the business of the year or something. I think it was like the second year I was there. We had the annual meeting of GE. Is about 600 people that were at that meeting, and there might have been 50 healthcare people or something. And so we won that award. That was like the flagship award. And I still remember that night going to the after party or whatever and watching how happy the people on the team were that we had, won. And just watching them high-fiving and hugging each other and everything. And I was like, I remember just thinking as a leader, like, this is the best of the best of the best. Like, I would do this job for free practically, just to have a night like this and watch people reach, crystallize those aspirations and, sort of achieve things they didn't think they were going to achieve. And it's incredibly energizing, rewarding experience. The last thing I would say on your question, though, is I had the blessing and the curse of not knowing much about the businesses that I got involved in, right? I didn't know anything about industrial businesses in India. You could testify, I didn't know anything about healthcare when I got to healthcare. And as a result, I lived very extensively outside of the business, like what's going on in the customers, what are they saying, that was disadvantageous because my radar wasn't very tuned, but it also was like I felt very empowered and almost liberated to be like, I'm going to find the answer outside of the conference room. I'm going to go find it, and the customers will guide you to what you need to do. And then, I could bring that back and translate that back to the team.
That's great. And so just listening to you talk about the team and their excitement, it's like Y is a function of X. And if you want to win, it's not about getting a goal that you win at, it's getting a goal that the customer will win. And when the customer wins, you'll win.
Exactly.
They found something bigger than themselves. So that's really great. Fantastic.
Yeah. It can never work the other way around.
Yeah. So, let's stay on the team concept a little bit. There has been so much conversation about DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
How do you view the topic of DE&I in today's business landscape? Is it necessary? Does DE&I have a place in business? And why is it so divisive and such a hot topic? There's probably like 12 questions I'm asking you at one time.
Yeah, and none of them politically charged or anything right now. So listen, I go back a few ways, because on one level it is way overblown and it's way over emotional and everything. Like some of the basic principles of DEI, which I'll talk about in a second, have been important for eternity, basically. But I still remember early in my career, this is when I was in the GE equity job, actually. There was one person on my team that had, and I inherited this person, just constantly had a different, you could look out and say it's sunny out. They'd say, no, it's cloudy out. They just constantly were coming from a different perspective. And at first I was kind of frustrated. But over time I was like, they constantly make us think differently. They constantly have a different perspective. They constantly push some new angle or something. And I came to relish that, having people with different perspectives. There is danger of groupthink. There is danger of, 8 like-minded people going into a room and, jumping off a cliff together. And so having people with different backgrounds, different experiences, et cetera, hugely helpful, and creating an environment where people feel like they can speak up and say what they, is on their minds, and frequently have meetings. If we were going to the GE board or whatever, and we just lay out our presentation, I'd ask the team, like, shoot holes in this. What, make the argument this is a bad thing that we're about to do. Like, really trying to cultivate that. So I think that diversity of experience, context, breadth, et cetera, which comes from a million sources: people's job experiences, people's life experiences, people's socioeconomic experience. I mean, diversity is a million stripes. Where they live, what cultures they grew up in, you can have the diversity stripe in an infinite number of ways. But that truly generates a higher quality decision. We use the phrase here at Charlesbank, all of us are smarter than any one of us. And, that I always felt like that diversity of thought thing was good like that. With respect to equity and inclusion, I just come back to, people want to be part of the team. So that notion of inclusion and contribution and, the table and impact, et cetera, people have felt that way forever. And so I think that one, to me, there's nothing controversial about that. And the equity thing ultimately is a sense of fairness, a sense of correlation between my efforts and my impact and the outcomes and my career outcomes and my access to things and my access to, promotions, et cetera. So I step back on one level and say, this is almost like apple pie. Like, diversity of thought, great. Fairness and open access to opportunity, who wouldn't want that? Inclusion, feeling like part of a team and contributing to a team, of course people would want that. So somewhere along the way, these sort of principles have gotten kind of, polarizing or distorted or whatever. But I think the core of it has always been and will always be important. And I think if you're leading organizations and say you don't care about those 3 things, independent of the sort of noise around them right now, you're headed for a trouble spot if you're like, I don't value diverse thoughts, I don't value inclusion, and I'm not going to treat people fairly. I mean, that is a real road to a problem about it.
Right. That's great. There are companies who have taken DEI out of their 10K, right? Annual report and whatever. And there are companies who have not. And my question is, do you believe, and I can't ask you to speak for every CEO, but I'm just asking this question, is it possible that they do still care? They do realize that, when I look at African Americans, we spend about $29 million a day at Target. Would Target really not believe in the diversity, and equity and inclusion, or are they responding? And there are companies, I think, that say that they're going to take this off of their annual report and all.
Yeah, lots.
They're really not doing it. They're really going to stay focused on it because they believe it's about the money, it's about the value, it's about the customer loyalty and all that stuff. Do you believe that's true, or do you think people are really just abandoning it?
I guess the way I think about it, first of all, political pressures in particularly a public company setting, they swing all over the place, obviously. So there was immense pressure to, embrace and really articulate DEI visions for a while. Now there's pressure to like sort of run away from them. So there's a pendulum of public pressure, political pressure, media thinking, social media thinking that's always swinging around. And depending on the nature of your company, it's sometimes hard to avoid it, I guess. And there were times at GE where I was like, I just want to focus on running the company, not some of these other things. But particularly in a consumer company or something, you're going to be drawn into that all the time. But I really don't think people would, in the privacy of their own thoughts, say, yeah, I really stand in the core principles.
Right. I agree. I think that's true. So let's switch up a little bit. We talked about, this is a show about winning and how do you win, and you've won clearly multiple times.
Sometimes.
We'll talk about your personal life in a minute, but have you ever had a major setback? Have you ever failed, or have you just been the luckiest, most skilled, most incredibly well, rounded individual and just kind of made it through?
Oh man, I've failed a bunch of times, including, my GE exit was a spectacular, very public kind of landing on your head. So we can talk about that. But, I look back, Daphne, there's so many times. I joined GE in summer of 1987. And in October of 1987 I was in a financial service, business. Incredible crash in the stock market and investments, and so I was like 2 months into the thing, saying, okay, well that's the end of that's the end of this business, and my first job is a failure, and et cetera. And it didn't turn out that way. But then I was in Japan. We had the financial crisis. I mean, that was like a very scary situation. But those were sort of macro things. I would say I did feel like extremely lucky along the way, like just jobs that I took or that were assigned to me or whatever kind of panned out. And but I was kind of chuckling when we were talking about have you ever failed. The GE, on one level it's the pinnacle. At the time it was a super highly followed thing, and to have it end the way it did was sort of like staggering to me. And I still remember, that weekend that I found out over a weekend, and it was explained to me by the lead director at the time, said, hey, the board just decided to go a different direction here. And I was very cognizant of all of the sort of situation at the company, et cetera. And I was like, okay, fine. That's obviously their prerogative. But I remember the words different. Hey, we're going to go a different direction. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound that bad. And I went home. I told my wife. I was staggered, but I was sort of like. But that Monday morning, like an idiot, I got up and watched CNBC at 6:30 in the morning. And they don't say GE's going a different direction. They say ousted, fired, dumped, and I remember just staring at that being like, wow, like 30 something years of my life is now
defined,
characterized like this. And so that's about as big a failure as you can, and I had a lot of, resilience and grit and thoughts about like what contributed to that final outcome, and what could I have done better, and what was circumstantial and things like that. But it was not good.
How did you not let it defeat you, or did it? I mean, did you go through months and months of your head in the sand and just like I can't show myself, or did you just bounce back? Did you were you a follower of your own teachings about opportunity and learning from this situation? You let it define you and destroy you.
I have to give a huge amount of credit to my wife, who has been like a bedrock. We've moved all around the world, et cetera. She had a broader perspective of everything, looking backwards, looking forwards. At the time, we were living in Boston, and I was partly thinking like, hey, I guess I got to move out of Boston because, I just exploded in Boston, and I'm coming to you from Boston right now. So that obviously didn't happen. But she kept me really grounded around like, hey, you don't do certain things well for 30 years and then just sort of turn into somebody different. Circumstances might be different, outcomes might be different, but you're still the person I married a long time ago and have trusted and, partnered with. And so she was a huge part. But there was definitely, and I think accurately in the beginning, I was like, I'm just radioactive right now. Like, no public company would hire me. But I have too much baggage, and so I definitely went around for a while. Like, wow, what do I do now?
Wow. And when you think about something like as big as GE, I don't know how many billions we were at that time. 2 billion?
A couple $100 billion probably at that point.
So can you imagine? I'll take anybody who fails at a $200 billion company to come run my $80 billion company for a week, because it's all a matter of context and scale. So it's hard to imagine. But one of the things that I've always learned was that you can't always control what happens to you.
Yeah.
But you can't control how you respond.
Yeah.
And it sounds like your response was, you went home. Sometimes you got to go home and have home take care of you, and then things will settle down in your mind. Things always settle down.
Yeah.
For you. And I just can't imagine anybody not wanting you to do.
Well, part of it, picking up the DEI and people's, I don't know, risk management or perception thing. At the time, and I think it was accurate at the time, people would be like, hey, I can hire 20 people to be the CEO. I don't need to hire somebody that has this, sort of smudge. I have other choices. And so it was more, I think sometimes, probably realistically that. But my wife and I, Daphne, we stayed a few days in Boston. And then I did get good advice from somebody who said, just go, you got to go do something. Like, you don't have to get a job tomorrow, but don't sit reading a book or they're like, do something. And so we threw our 2 dogs in the backseat of our car and we drove around the US for like 10 weeks. Almost no plan. We'd plan 3 days in advance. And I'd always wanted to do that. And those weeks were just, I kept telling people I was very actively doing nothing. Like I'd spend, be driving 6 or 7 hours a day through like Oklahoma or, Mississippi or, out west and it was really kind of a good break from, that prior chapter to what came next.
Great. So it was a nice bridge for you. Okay.
Yeah.
And I was talking about DEI. It's something I meant to say while you were talking about diversity of perspective and the guy that kind of drove you crazy. There's the white hat, red hat, yellow hat, black hat exercise that people go through. And for those of you that may not know, when you're trying to solve a problem where you're trying to look at a project or look at an acquisition or whatever it is, you have people put on a particular colored hat. And when they put that hat on, that might be a red hat, their job is to come and look at all the things that could go wrong with that opportunity. Then somebody else is wearing a yellow hat, and they may look at all the things that will go right with that opportunity. So you have those different perspectives that allows the group at large to say, okay, now we've heard all the perspectives. So diversity of thought, especially, is really, really clever and important, and usually it comes from your socioeconomic background, your pedigree, and a lot of things as well. So as you think, so you are. So I just wanted to add that point.
And one thing, Daphne, I'd just add to that, I subscribe to that 1,000%, is, we're talking leadership and running teams and whatnot. Making the people feel comfortable that they can say something opposing, different, against the grain, etc., is 200% of the outcome of this thought. Because if people feel like, well, I think John wants to do this deal, so if I say like, here are the reasons we shouldn't do it, that's going to be bad for me. It's if they feel that way, that's probably the single biggest fatal flaw of a leader is if you aren't getting people to say what they think, then it's an echo chamber, and your risks have gone up exponentially. So that's a big human thing.
If they think that you are the smartest person in the room, as they say, you're in the wrong room. That's what happens sometimes with leaders, where they think they're the smartest ones around. I think I have a person comes to my mind right now. So,
Yeah.
So let me switch a little bit about your background. What was it like growing up in the Flannery household? What were some of the lessons that you have learned from your mom and dad, and do you still practice those today? And
Yeah. So I grew up in Virginia. I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia. My dad worked for the government. So people who actually live in Virginia don't recognize Alexandria as part of Virginia, but it technically is part of Virginia. And I lived there till I was 10, and then we moved to Connecticut, West Hartford, Connecticut. And I have two older sisters, really accomplished. My oldest sister is a dean at Notre Dame, and my middle sister is a managing partner of a very big law firm. So I was always scrambling around trying to keep up with them. But the two things my parents have both passed away now, but my dad, the two things I think of, he worked really hard in ways that I didn't really appreciate because I didn't know any differently. I had a newspaper route from the time I was like 10 till I went to college. And so it would come at like 5 a.m. I'd get up, I'd go, and he would grab the newspaper. He'd be sitting at the kitchen table at 5:15 with a yellow legal pad, like working on whatever he was working on, et cetera. And I kind of thought like, well, that's what everybody does. Like, I didn't know any differently, but he had a very strong work ethic, but he universally was like the nicest, sort of he was driven on A level, but super nice, super gentle, super considerate. He was very religious. People just literally would say he would treat, the lowest level person around him like a king. And, he really, really had a work ethic and a servant leader before I knew what a servant leader was. He just zero ego, which is not the same as being unassertive or something. He just was sort of like a nice person to everybody. And so that stuck with me. And my mom was super smart. She stayed at home kind of in keeping with the times, but was the main thing I remember with her was like very funny, like really funny, like didn't take herself or life too seriously.
Really?
And, if I look at my management style over the years, those are some of the things people would sort of describe of like sort of lower ego, works hard, uses humor to diffuse like an awkward situation or a tense situation or whatever. And I don't really think about doing those things, but I recognize that I do those things, and that's from my parents for sure.
That's incredible. That's great. And I see some of that. In you. I don't know how funny you are, but you do use humor.
You're very funny. I will give myself that credit.
Okay, great. We were talking to John Flannery, and such a wonderful man, and I just appreciate him spending time. One of the things I wanted to do, we may go back and ask one more question, but I do want to do a lightning round with you a little bit.
Good.
And see what's on your mind. So even though I'm going to give you a couple of, easy ones here, because the game has already happened. But I got to ask you, Kansas City or the Eagles?
So I was actually, I'm a Redskins fan from my Washington days. I really don't like the Eagles, but I was rooting for the Eagles. I was just kind of sick of the spoil of riches that had gone to the Chiefs. So I like them. I love Mahomes, everybody, but it was a little, time for a change, I think.
All right.
So and the Eagles crushed them. It was not close.
It was pretty, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Pretty. Beach or skiing?
Beach or skiing?
Yeah,
Probably, I'm not like beach, like sit on the beach and read, but I'm very outdoorsy, and we've had a beach house for a long time. I love like fishing.
Mm.
I like the sound of I like skiing. I like the mountains, et cetera. We spend a lot of time hiking in the mountains, but if I had to pick, there's something about the water and, the sunrise and the sunset. And so I'd take the beach.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Which streaming platform do you watch? Netflix or Amazon Prime?
Out of those two, I definitely use Netflix more. I'm like probably a lot of people. I think I'm paying for like 15 of these networks and watching like 4 of them.
What's
But
your
it's great. When we lived overseas, our kids, we kind of went off the grid. This was 2005 to 13. People forget how much this has changed. My kids basically weren't watching American, media. Like they all went to college straight from overseas, 2 from Japan, 1 from India. And when they got to, they're like, wow, I'm like illiterate about like what everybody else is talking about in terms of TV or movies or, you couldn't stream.
right? Well, what's your favorite Netflix show right now? What are you watching? What are you binging on?
Oh, I'm not binging on shows right now because my wife has organized in the last few years an Oscars party that we have. So I'm binging on all the movies that are nominated.
Oh,
And we just saw on Monday a movie called I'm Still Here, which is about a sort of corruption thing in Brazil in the 1970s, and an amazing woman whose husband is kidnapped by a military regime and killed ultimately, and she holds her family together and goes back to law school and prosecutes the government. It's an unbelievable movie and a great motivator, I think, for people to watch a real like lioness, holding it together.
yeah, that's great. Well, I'm going to watch that one. I hadn't heard of
Yeah,
it. So
money back guarantee for me on that.
that's great. I'll probably have to ask you for some other ones since you all are the Oscar experts right now. And I remember when Anthony Davis, left the Lakers. I think that's one of the things he said. I'm here.
Yeah.
When his debut. So, okay, if you could give a TED talk on something outside of private equity, what would it be?
I've been thinking a lot lately about everything that's going on in the world. And we lived overseas a lot. I'm really drawn right now to the themes of like service, helping other people. It's partly maybe a phase of life now where it's sort of I'm feeling the pull of we should be doing more things for other people, kind of thing, and the reward of that. So as I said, we lived in India in particular. We were like really involved in some of the and my wife in particular around education and kids living in some really tough sort of circumstances and trying to get educated and a leg up. So maybe probably the reward of service and the the obligation. I think with all the polarization and noise and social media, and it's very easy to get sort of sucked into your own little corner of the world and be like, I'm just going to ride it out on my phone and scroll my way to, the next station. And I think that notion of like humanity, connectedness, service, we can't lose that.
Pendulum is seeming to swing. It's all about me.
Yeah, exactly.
And when my son graduated from Morehouse, 10 years ago or whenever it was, the chancellor said, I want you all to go out there and do well. But while you're doing well, I want you to also do good.
Yeah.
What it sounds like to me that you would talk about doing good.
Yeah. I'm reading a biography of Martin Luther King Jr. right now that was published last year. it's just fantastic, and it's loaded with Morehouse history and fun facts. So if you're interested in Morehouse, that's the place to go.
That's right. That's right. He was a Morehouse man.
Yeah.
What brings you joy?
It just sounds trite, but the inner core for me is just my family. It brings you joy. It brings you the stresses. Like, my wife would always joke, like, if any of our kids even had like a cold, I would be like disabled. Like, anything that was bad or tough for them, really stressed me out. But that is the most. And we developed this a lot living overseas, where we were like, you land in Tokyo or something. For a few days, you're like, hey, the only people that you know or can count on or whatever is your family, and it transcends, good times, bad times. When I had the GE sort of crash, the thing I felt worse about my family having to experience that than me having to experience that. So we have a couple of grandkids now, and probably growing over time. So I love watching my wife and kids growing and doing well.
That's great. I love it. Love it. I think I'm going to ask one last question, and that is, I was reading an article earlier today that talked about how we strive to win. I mean, this is the winner's circle, so we try not to everybody win as well. But then there's like this discussion about what's the opposite of that. And so my question to you is, do you believe in winning or losing? Do you believe in winning or learning? Or do you believe in winning or living? Or all of them?
There's a lot in that one. First, I'd say the desire to win. Win can be a like energizing word or a pejorative term of like, I win because somebody else loses. So there is this notion of like, I think the desire to win is fundamentally human. It's global, and this sense of just like progress, getting better, achieving things. I think that's a super healthy,
Right.
almost survival gene, right? Of making people want to. So I do, and I've always been really competitive. I've been low key, but very competitive. So I think that notion of I want to win is important, and not one to feel badly about. But I think just reflecting on my own life, at a minimum, it's win and learn. Or win or learn, because there's in any time something goes wrong or not the way you want, there's a lot to examine about why and how that happened. But see, I guess I'm really drawn to the last one, which is life is just a series of sort of things going on around you, and it's not zeros and ones. It's not I won or lost. It's not I won, you lost. So I guess I'm ultimately drawn to the game never stops. You just, there is no such thing as losing unless you give up, and so I'd probably, if I had to pick one of those three, I'd go with win and live.
I love it.
Life goes on.
Yeah, life goes on, and I love that. So I thought it just really caused me to pause today as I read that. All right, so we are almost at the top of the hour, and it's gone by so fast. And I thank you. If anybody wanted to interview a CEO, we did. And I'm hoping that you guys enjoy the video. That if you couldn't join us today, that you can enjoy the video of John. And I just appreciate John, you being so approachable, so available, and so humble. And my husband's a pastor, and the name of our ministry is The Least of These Ministries. And you talked about your father treating people, who they might have been the lowest economic status, but he treated them like a king anyway. And that is really what our ministry tries to be like. And I see that in you. You got that certainly from your.
Yeah. It's kind of the number one way you can judge a person's character, I think, is, do they exploit that, or so I'm a huge believer in
Yes.
you got to be. And when my kids were growing up, my boys, I'd be just like, hey, be nice. You be nice to everybody. Don't be a knucklehead. That was like my sophisticated life advice to them. Like fundamentally, just be a good person, treat people well, and everything else will take care of itself.
Well, I thank you so much for your time
Oh,
tonight.
it's so fun to catch up, Daphne.
Thank you for being in my corner. They say that just because somebody's in your circle doesn't mean they're in your corner. I believe that you're in my circle and you're in my corner, and
100%.
you're in the corner of everyone who wants to be a leader, and you kind of showed them that today. So I appreciate you so much.
Great. Awesome. To be continued.
Yeah. What did you say?
I said to be continued.
Absolutely.
All right.
With that, we're going to we'll talk about the next thing. I want you guys to get ready for our next episode. We've got several episodes coming up next. Minda Hart is coming up March 19th. That's the day after my birthday. She is an award-winning author, bestseller. She now has a movie that's coming out off of one of her books, The Memo. She'll be joining me on March 19th. Stephanie Sylvester is CEO of Avatar Buddy. And then we're going to get my other friend is going to be coming in May. So a very, very busy schedule coming up. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, comment, and share with others. Share with your friends. We want to help people to grow and to learn. Remember, by myself, I know a little, but when I bring people like John on, we know everything as an organization, as a people. So stay tuned. I'll see you guys next time on the Winner's Circle. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.